So with the new tile builder, and Christian's done a fantastic job of this, we'll just start. So you can access it one of two ways, through the toolbox tool up here in the top left, or you can access it via the create strip trial and finish up in the same spot. So before we get in there, I was just going to talk about AB lines, because this has been one of the big improvements by having it in view, is being able to overlay AB line information and previous application. So with the AB line management, this client's connected to AgCentre. So if you go into setup, start on M1, and if we go to the guidance line area, because of the API, we can see all of the AB lines that he has available for this farm. And so here, this is the one that relates to this farm. So you can import that. Then the next stage is that when you've got AB lines coming in, typically for our growers, even on large farms, they might only have 2 AB line setups for the whole farm. One east-west, one north-south, and they use that. They don't have an individual one for each field. So because of that, when you come in, so now this AB line's been imported into the PCT Agcloud guidance lines, and I've just brought it up the list, and you can see that it's linked, and into the edit button. So all of the information has migrated across from AgCentre, the coordinates of the A and B point and the orientation, but there's no swath width. And you'll find the same when you're looking in the setup land manager area in AgCentre. When you bring up the guidance line, all of this numerical or the descriptors there, but there's nothing about width. So I'm just going to type in 36 here for the boom spray. And the reason this is important is that when we come to bring up a call on an AB line in the trial builder at the moment, if your AB line is in here but it doesn't have a defined width, it won't recall it and display it because it doesn't have that piece of information that it needs to be effective. So I'm just going to hit save. So when we go back to the trial builder, we had our strips, available AB lines. So there's the AB line that we've just initiated. Okay, so now we've worked. So we've got our AB line. We've picked it up from the list. That's where we were at before, and it's displayed it over the map. So it automatically snaps the strip trials to the same bearing, and then you can just work your way through the instructions of what you'd like to create. So I'm just going to leave this as a fertilizer trial. And there's 2 purposes with this trial builder. One is to build a design that you want to integrate with your RX map so that the trial automatically is applied in the field during the operation. The second purpose is to save that design so that when you analyse the results at the end of the year, it can be recalled and you can integrate it with your yield and zones to build a cost-benefit report. So you see that it's automatically picked up the 36 metres and the heading and so forth, and it's got a default length of 300. So now you can start to design your trial, and I'm not sure how you do them there in the US, but we
lots of different theories.
Yeah. Well, the first one that was established many years ago, and you want each treatment to be 3 times the width of the applicator. So if you're putting out, not the applicator, the harvest operation. So if your harvest is 11 metres, 12 metres, well, then you need a strip. You need at least 3 passes of the air cart. That's how wide your treatment should be. Yeah. So we'll just say we're going to have 3 treatments. We only want 1 pass, 36 metres, because that's going to be 3 times the width of the harvester. We don't want any passes in between for this instance, and we only want 1 replicate. So there's our base design. And then you can decide where you want to position it or whether you'd like to make it longer. So that would be our trial. Now, I'll bring this to attention up here. There's a snap tool. And if you leave it on the top one, it'll want to see how it wants to, if you drag it, it snaps to the lines. So what the assumption is there is that those lines represent the outside of the air cart and not the centre of the tractor. Does that make sense? So each pass, yeah. Now, if you go to this other one where snap to centre, then when you move it, this is what we typically do because we accept that those AB lines are the centre of the tractor. So the treatment straddles halfway either side of that that line. So that's your trial. So one of the things with AB lines, and this may be just a personal hang up, is that bit that we didn't know when we brought in that AB line information, we had to put in a width. But we don't necessarily know when that line comes in, which piece of equipment it represents the actual centre of. So a habit I've got into is in the background, and I think this is another huge benefit of having this set up in view, is that we can bring in another layer. So here is our actual nitrogen trial. So this went out. We designed this trial in here, and it went out to the letter. So we must have got it right. But I think one of the reasons that helped that is that I brought in a previous pass of this operation and was able to sort of validate that we were on the right track. So when we zoom in here, we can see our lines going right up the middle of the previous operation.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, so so I went ahead and saved that trial. So we'll so the next stage is you can put in your treatments here. So I've got Christian. We're just going to say this is urea nil. And it won't matter if you put in letters here. You don't actually have to have just a number, because when you come to use the trial for other purposes, you can edit these back to their true rate. So we're just going to say that's nil. So while we're here, the other option you have, which sort of is a bit related to what Ed said, is that you can clone the trial. So you may decide, in this instance, we had one trial that ran the length of the field, but other times you might decide that you would like to have just smaller trials, but you would cover the variability in such a way that, this one would be down in the soil and this one over here. So when we designed this trial this year, we actually had the EM map in the background.
Yeah, or management zones map is what we see a lot too. Put them different, the same trial in different zones.
Yeah. So we had this sitting in the background. So that's why our trial was long. It went right from this end of the field, right through this higher EM area, right to the other end. And we'll discuss a little bit the background of the purpose of that trial in a minute. So probably the key things here are, if you can get some AB lines in, that will ensure that your bearing is correct. And sometimes I save the AB line, as I did at the start of this talk, or other times I just have a window open with the land manager from John Deere, and I just transpose the bearing. But then what you need is a previous application. So I think this is a good validator. So there's two times we build the trials. One is in advance of the operation, where we want to build it into the RX map so that it goes out at the right time. And other times we find out afterwards that the operator's decided to put out some strips for different reasons. And he says, look, here's my documentation. I'd like to analyse the results. So we actually build the trial afterwards over the as applied data. So I'm just going to bin that now for the time being. I did miss a step. Christian added this one just the other day, where you can put in the season and the name of the trial. Yeah. So the reason being is that I've been going back and dusting off old trial results, and we wanted to build our trials this year, but they were actually happened 2 and 3 years ago. And sometimes we've got more than one trial in the same field. So that's one way you can set up your naming there. So when it saves, it'll go in as a layer as shrimp trial template there. And the other place you can name your trial, if you wanted to do this post creation, is if you click on the more options, you go down to edit layer, then it allows you to put in a source. So I did that yesterday. I went in and said, well, look, this is a 2023 trial. It was the Future Farm program for urea, and it saves that as a prefix. So when you bring it up in the strip trial analyzer at the moment, which we'll look at, it's clearly marked which one you want to work with. So now we'll look at the incorporation into your RX. So I'm just going to use my EM map, and we're going to make a variable rate prescription. Going to make it for urea. And so I think initially, I'm just going to break this up on Jenks's. Remove small areas. So that's busted up into our zones. We're ready to put in our rates. But then I've typically done this as a second step. I think you could probably choose it on the way down. But there's layers for intersection. So this is where if you had a farming system, which is the buffer, and you'd created that under the other tool, which is the individual farming system creation tool, you can only incorporate one at a time. So if you wanted the buffer around the outside of the field and a trial incorporated in your prescription, you would need to make that buffer when you make your trial. We can go back and have a look at that in a minute. I forgot to do that.
One thing to note for everybody too is farming type also shows up there. So if you've got pivots and you want to just treat the corners and the irrigated different, you can do that.
So the trial is embedded into the RX. I can still see my zones. So your decision may be that this is 0, this isn't 60, and this is 120. And I guess the call is then, is the rest of the field standard rate, which in this case it would have been, they might have gone 80 with all of this, I can't recall. And they just embedded the trial. So now when everything else is the same, but it's nicely embedded your trial, the benefit at the grower end is that hopefully if his variable rate setup's correct, that trial should go out automatically. We're going to go back to view now and just to follow up on what Luke mentioned about the farming system. When you add new strips, if you'd like a buffer to go in at the same time, you can type it in here and it will build it in. So when you come to incorporate your trial into your RX prescription to go to op center or to the machinery, is that when you did the intersection, then it would also embed the buffer around the outside. But if you create your trial and save it, and then you go and create a farming system one separately, they'll be listed in the choices for intersection. So you'll have here, you'll have strip trial template and farming system. But I found, and maybe I got the sequence wrong, but I couldn't get them both to add. You can only choose one. So if you want that farming system in there as well, you need to make it in the strip trial builder and add that buffer in at that stage. Okay, so the next stage is to look at the analysis of the results at the end of the year. And for that, I'm going to go into the data edit area. And the reason being is when we analyse our yield, the way we typically present a yield map back to the client, it's interpolated and extrapolated. And therefore, every possibility, we're going to be mixing information from adjoining treatments and virtually ending up with a shandy. So we're diluting any potential response information that may have been there. So if we go into data edit, so you're all familiar with this, with cleaning up the data. And I got reasonably heavy on some of this because of the trial running through, and there was some headland information and some trees and things that I just wanted to ensure none of that information was included in the analysis. So when you get to the bottom, there's an additional button, which you're probably familiar with, but you can just open this up and go create trial. And the purpose of it is that it makes a second yield map, which is specific for analysing trial results. The reason the editing tools are here is that you might be quite specific and say, the information I want for my trial is here, so I'm just going to cut that out and keep it. I just left it universal, so just hit apply, which I probably didn't need to do. So the map we're about to make is almost like a plot trial approach where you've just got the swaths of the machine harvest data without them joining any information alongside of them. I shouldn't have hit apply then, should I? Right. This is reality. So here's our normal yield map, all interpolated in. And this is our trial yield map. So essentially it reproduces the clean data without any interpolation. So we'll go ahead and have a look in the trial analysis. So you can access that through here or through the analytics button. Goes through there. So when you're in here, you need to click on the strip trial. Well, the info is going to come up in a minute. So I'm going to take our trial that we named, and I'm going to grab and you can strip this list down by your selections up here, but I can see what I need, and I'm just going to overlap those two. So here's our trial design, our EM layer. So we want to assess whether we've got different responses from the rates in different soil types. There's a couple of steps you need to do in preparation. The first one is I swap this over, and I'm going to zone my EM up. You could easily already have your previous management zones that you've saved, but I'm just going to put this on Jenks's natural breaks. It's 3 zones, and we'll split that up. So then on the trial side, this is where we need to adjust some of this information, because at the moment, a couple of things will happen. If we progress forward now, number one, it's going to include the response to the rest of the field in the trial analysis with the strips, which you may want that, but sometimes it makes it a very busy graph to read and very hard to, it's not as insightful as what might have happened. The other one is that your economics, you can't go ahead and do your economics of cost-benefit analysis because you haven't got this as a number. You've got urea written in it. So if you go into edit, you can just type in the word ignore, and that will get rid of your background. And then we're just going to type in, clean this up. So we've got this back. You could use either one, but I find this is better because of the economics that you can put in. So we just hit OK, and we'll see that it's got rid of all of that, and we've got our three rates overlapping. Here's a graphic, a display of what that looks like. And then we get to this point, and here we've got our two yield options. We've got our normal interpolated map, and we've got our trial map. So as you come down, this is the bit you can interact with your client on. So we'll just say that our wheat price this year was 385, and our urea in kilograms, because that's what our rates are in kilograms a hectare, let's just say it was 80 cents kilogram or $800 a tonne. And our control treatment would have been the intermediate treatment. So that's the idea of this trial, was that 60 is what I'd normally do. What's happened if I drop it back to 0 and push it up to 120? If you hadn't changed this description up here and you still had the word urea in your treatments, none of this comes up because it can't find a number for your treatment. So then it continues to build down, and it says, okay, this is the performance of each zone across the paddock. And then this table looks at, really this is just tabularized of what the graph is above. But here's zone 1 with low EM, and these are your three rates and your three mean yields. Second zone and the third zone. So when we get to this bottom trial, it looks at, which is, if we look at the graph itself, if we go to zone 1, we can see that 120 compared to the standard rate, is 0.34 of a tonne, or not quite, 0.26. Here it's still 0.34, and here it's actually even greater again. So there's quite a huge step up by changing the urea from 60 to 120. And therefore, when it analyses each treatment in each zone on its own, it's determined that the yield increase more than paid for the additional urea, and these are the profit per hectare. So it's actually quite staggering what they got. But this field went, probably averaged a bit over 5 tonne a hectare for wheat, which is pretty handy for us. And in a wet season, the demand the crop had needed more urea, and we got a very positive response. The other advantage of this little system here is that you can do what-if scenarios. You say, well, look, the forecast for wheat next year, let's just say it's, I don't know how this will work, 225, and it's going to be a shocking year for fertiliser, and it's going to cost me $1.20 a kilogram for urea. And then it starts to change the economics. So suddenly, the gains you get are down to a few dollars, and you say, well, it's just not worth me changing my rate. So there's a sort of like an exploration you can do here, and going back and forth with what your revenue for your grain is versus the cost of the product, to have a look at how sensitive your response is to changing economics. When you get to the bottom, typically I don't want to recreate anything and save in an Agcloud. So I untick that button, And actually, we'll go back to what this really is. I think this is one of our best tools in Agcloud, and because of validation. Is if you're going to change your management, and we're talking to growers that have been doing particular practice now for several generations, and we're proposing that they're going to suddenly change that approach and go variable rate. And I think it's fair that they should see, well, show me the money and the logic behind doing this. So I think our whole trial validation is very important. And I've also found it's a great way of getting the client to take some ownership over what they're doing on their farm with their applications, and I guess paying attention to the setup of the equipment to ensure the information they get back is as robust as possible. So we know that we had a urea trial. Open that up.